Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Musician's Mentor Podcast. As per usual, I am your host, Travis Mark, and today I've got the distinct pleasure of speaking with Rock and Roll Hall of Famer, Kenney Jones. Kenney is a British drummer, best known for playing with groups like The Faces, The Small Faces, and eventually even The Who after Keith Moon's death. He's backed some of the biggest names in the world, from Rod Stewart to Jeff Beck, Eric Clapton, Chuck Berry, Jerry Lee Lewis. And as like most of my guests, the truth is if I was to read out all his credits during this intro, we would be here forever. Now, as usual, before we jump straight into this interview, I'd like to please encourage you to go and leave us a rating or review on your preferred streaming platform. You can also interact with us on certain things like Spotify or Instagram or Facebook. Likewise, don't forget to check out our partnership with the lovely folks over at Soundbrenner. The link can be found in the show notes. And I do want to just make it known that, unfortunately, because of some audio issues, Kenney and I had to do this interview twice. So you will hear me say certain things like, hey, sorry to ask you this again. But, you know, he was super gracious, and I can't thank him enough. Just an absolute legend, in my opinion. One of my favorite drummers. And even if you think you've never heard him play, you probably have, just based on the amount of hits that he was on, with two of my favorites being Itchycoo Park by the Small Faces, and then eventually Eminence Front by The Who off the It's Hard album, which we do talk about. So check out the interview. I'm going to stop rambling. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the one and only Mr. Kenney Jones. Alrighty. Second attempt with the wonderful Mr. Kenney Jones, Rock and Roll Hall of Fame member, superstar drummer, flat-out rock star who rose to fame with bands like The Faces, The Small Faces, The Who, The Law. Just it goes on and on and on. Kenney, let me start by saying thanks again for joining me. How are things going? And I know that I've asked you some of these questions before, but what are you currently up to?
Currently up to going back in the studio with Rod and Woody, Ronnie Wood and Rod Stewart, to work on the long-awaited sort of album that we're trying to put together.
Amazing. Let's go back as early as possible. I know you were born in Whitechapel, and, you know, eventually the Small Faces are active from around sort of 64, 65. If you wouldn't mind, tell me what initially attracted you to music, and more specifically, the drums.
Well, when I was a kid, I mean, I'm talking about like 6 or 7 years old, we had the processions, Catholic processions that went around the streets of London, East End of London, that is. And there was, my Uncle Dave was a band leader. He couldn't read a word of music. I mean, he was the maestro. In other words, he led the band with a big pole, you know. And it was like a gold pole. And so behind him was the band. Behind him was a row of side drummers, like 6 or 7 side drummers. There's a little boy I ran along the side of the side drummers, pretending I was one of the side drummers. And this went on for a long time. Then one day I went into my father was a bit of a carpenter in his spare time. So he had in his shed, he had a big tin of nuts and bolts and screws and God knows in an old biscuit tin. So I went into his shed, it tipped up the nails and screws and put them on the floor, turned the biscuit tin upside down, got 2 bits of firewood and started playing it, so it sounded like a snare drum.
That's cool.
So that was my early. I put it down to the influence was there.
Yeah, and you know, when you were starting to try and play, even on the biscuit tin, obviously you wouldn't have known what rudiments and things were. Were you simply just trying to emulate what you had seen the side marching drummers do, or were you just hitting like kind of caveman style?
Well, no, I was trying to emulate the sound and try and pretend. And I was going singing the song sort of thing to myself. So I was,
Yeah. And I know when we spoke before, you mentioned something about a banjo, that you originally seemed quite interested in the banjo. Can you tell me that story again, if you wouldn't mind?
Well, a friend of mine said we should form a skiffle group. I said, "What's the skiffle group?" So there's one on TV tonight. When this is in the late 50s. So we went to watch this program that came on, this TV show, and it was a music one, and it was Lonnie Donegan was on there, and he was singing "Rock on the Line" and playing the banjo. So I fell in love with the banjo, the sound of it, the rhythm he was playing, and that was it. So "Rock on the Line" was a great song. So I was hooked on that, and I'd seen a banjo next to Bethnal Green Station in a pawn shop. For months it was hanging up in the front window. So the next day we went up to buy the banjo with no money in our pockets. We didn't know how we were going to buy it, but we were that eager. We get there, looked in the window, and the banjo had gone. So I walked inside, said to the salesman, "Where's the banjo?" And he said, "Well, it's gone. He's paid for it. It's a pawn shop. He's paid for it and he's taken it." I said, "Can you get it back? Get it back, get it back." No, I can't get it back. He's paid for it. So I walked out of the shop, and my mate said to me, "You're really upset, aren't you?" So I said, "Yeah, I'm upset." So my other friend's got a drum kit. So I get him to bring it round this afternoon. So that was that. That was the end of that. So the sitting in my house, and this guy brings around a drum kit. The extent of it was a floor tom-tom, bass drum, and two sticks. One was broken. We couldn't glue it together. Spent all afternoon trying to glue this one stick together. You imagine the frustration. It didn't work. So I learned to play on 1.5 stick.
Yeah, amazing. How difficult was it to get gear back then? Like, so even something as simple as a pair of drumsticks. How easy or difficult was it to get that kind of thing?
Well, when I eventually started to play, went up to a music shop near to where in East Ham, next to where Ronnie Lane used to live, and walked into, it's called the J6s. So I walked into this shop, and I had to get on a bus to do this, and get all the way out. It was about 3 miles away. So went into the shop, and I saw this drum kit, a white drum kit. It's a white Olympic, and it had calfskins on, really old jazz gear. And so I just said, "Well, how much is that drum kit?" And he said, "That's £64, 9 shillings and twopence." Something like that, anyway.
Yeah,
So I said, "Okay, that's in old money, of course."
of course.
So I said, okay. I said, can I buy that? He said, "Well, you have to sign. You have to get mum and dad to sign the HP agreement." What? What's HP? I only know what HP's course for. And he said, "Well, it's hire purchase means you got to get mum and dad to sign it. So, and I said, you have to put a deposit down." So how much is that? And he said, £10. So I said, I'll go back home and get £10. So I went back home, and on the mantelpiece was my mum's purse. And I opened it up, and there was £10 in there. So I took the £10 out. I didn't steal it. I mean, it's the best. Let's put it this way: it's the best investment she ever had.
Yeah, I can believe that.
Went back on the bus, got the guy, gave me his £10. He said, "Well, I'll bring the kit to drum." I gave him my address. He said, "We'll bring the drum kit around 6 o'clock tonight. So I said, okay, go. 6 o'clock came. There was a bang on the door. My mum and dad were going, oh, nobody's coming. No one comes around this time of night. And my dad went up to open the door. He opened the door, and this guy walked in with a big bass drum. And walks right in there, was standing there with a mouth open. Didn't say a word. Said, what do you want? I said, oh, it's okay, put it in the front room. So put it in the front room. And he set it up. So, and then you're talking about drumsticks. The first thing that he came out, he said, can you play anything? I said, no, not really. I'm just learning to play. Said, well, look. So he gets the brushes out and goes, yeah, like a jazz band. So what? I've never seen brushes before. I don't know what they are.
Yeah.
I only know 1.5 sticks. So and I looked at my mum and I looked at my dad, and this guy just showed me that, and I shut my eyes, looked at my mum and dad, looked at the snare drum, and went. I closed my eyes, and I was doing. I could hear that I was doing it. I thought, shit, I'm doing it.
Yeah.
Because I watched the start. What he did, we pressed the brushes onto the snare drum skin. So I was kind of just doing a circle, and we were right, and I was going. So that was it. My mum and dad looked at me and went, they said, look, we've never seen such a smile that coming over your face when you did that. So we're going to sign the HP agreement. That was it.
Amazing, man. So eventually, you land up in the Small Faces. I'm sure there were a few things before that. But the Small Faces had some huge hits, several top 10 hits, in fact, including songs like All or Nothing, Ichiku Park, Tin Soldier. Now, I know we spoke about this before, but was it ever weird for you personally achieving such heights and possibly realizing that you were having a music career during such an exciting time as the British invasion?
Well, it's all a bit fast, as you say. I mean.
Yeah.
I was 13 when I was learning to play the drums. By the time I was 14, we'd formed the Small Faces. By the time I was 15, I had a hit record in the charts.
Crazy.
And here I am now, 60 years later.
Yeah. Absolutely crazy. Did it feel like, so many people love that saying, oh, overnight success. Did it feel like that because it happened so quick?
Well, my feet never touched the ground, so I never had a chance to think about it. Before I knew it was in France and Germany, doing gigs and God knows what.
Yeah.
So I thought, well, I don't know what's happened to me.
Unreal.
So I just went with the flow of it.
Yeah, absolutely unreal, man.
Unreal. And the great thing was the rest of the band, Steve, Ronnie, and Mac, were all great buddies. We all got along well together. We had telepathic attitude. They never told me what to play. I never told them what to play, and we just got on with it. So it was like an adventure.
I think that's so great. I have conversations with a lot of guests now from sort of more modern bands, and there seems to be this distinct kind of change when it came to bands in particular. In your era, and even for many decades after that, bands were very much a gang. It was like friends who were trying to achieve greatness through music. And I think, and this is just my opinion, but I think somewhere along the way, with so many people purely trying to achieve fame, the music almost became secondary. And so like these groups of people would get together to make music to achieve fame, but a lot of them aren't friends. A lot of them have separate managers. A lot of them don't even talk. It's like they get together, they play their shows, they get paid, but they don't seem to be or have that all for one kind of attitude. It's something I really admire about the era of like the Faces, the Stones, the Beatles, the Who. that British invasion in general. It's super admirable.
Well, we were so happy to be with each other, play our music. We never thought about being famous. That came up as a surprise to us.
Yeah, a perk of the job.
Yeah, exactly.
So, as you've gotten older, when you talk with people like Ronnie Wood or potentially guys like Pete Townsend or even maybe Rod Stewart or any of those kinds of guys, do you guys ever get into these discussions about how the movement and period of music that you were involved in essentially shaped the whole music business?
Not really. I mean, because we're all in the same boat, really. We all suffer the same surprise, So we never really asked each other what we're doing here,
Yeah.
So we're really just still going with the flow.
Incredible. And Kenny, a bit of a strange question. I mean, obviously, with the fame, certain perks came along that potentially allowed you to live a certain lifestyle that maybe perhaps you wouldn't have had you just gotten a normal 9 to 5 job and lived that kind of lifestyle. But I get the impression that music was such an important part of you and still is. Because I mean, I know you've told me before that you've still got a drum kit in that room and you still go practice and stuff like that. Do you think had you perhaps not had the hits and the songs in the charts and stuff, do you think you would have still played your entire life?
Oh, I think you can, once you start learning to play the drums or any instrument, you're really serious about it, and you become part of it. The songs, when I play them, become part of me if they're good songs.
Yeah.
My drumming is a part of me, and I couldn't live without it. I mean, I could never retire.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's in you. When it, like you say, when it's in you, it's in you. So, I read that you still do some stuff every now and then with the Jones Gang. Very cool name, by the way. Was that a play on the James Gang?
No, I hate the bloody name.
Serious? Why?
It sounds like a country and western band. English country and western band.
What would you have called it if you didn't call it that?
Shitface.
That's amazing. Well, I was going to ask, what are some of the biggest changes you've seen in the music business now in comparison to back then, especially when you are still active out there?
Well, it's very difficult to answer. I mean, because basically, it seems like every decade music changes, and you get surprised every time, every decade. I mean, punk came along, rock came along, country music. I mean, I love country music now, and I didn't really know about it before.
Yeah.
But country, we all love country music now. But it's a bit like country music's got a swing to it.
Yeah.
But I mean, every time I play, I try and put a swing to whatever I'm doing, even if it's straightforward. Try and swing it a little bit.
Yeah.
But it's surprising that how much music changes. Well, I can't wait for the next surprise.
Is there anything sort of, I don't necessarily want to say current or modern, but is there anything you listen to that maybe over the last few years has been like a real surprise to you that you've kind of gone, man, I really like this, and maybe you didn't or wouldn't have exposed yourself to that kind of music prior?
Yeah, I mean, there's certain rap songs. I mean, I don't particularly like rap songs, but some of the drumming on some of the rap songs are great, and also vocally they can get more rhythmic.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting you say that. I've often, again, in some of these conversations, I've often said to people, the way that some MCs rap, it's almost like a form of filling on a drum kit. Some guys kind of will go straight 16ths, or some guys will, I mean, the sort of eighth note triplet or slightly syncopated eighth notes, that's become very popular in hip hop. But it's interesting that you say that, because I know during our last conversation, you and I spoke for a little bit about groove, and a lot of rap songs have groove. It's like this consecutive, just constant loop of a groove. And I think that's really cool. I want to ask you about your initial involvements or eventual involvement with The Who. I'm guessing overall a tough situation to find yourself in. And I know that you did tell me about it before. I'm going to ask you, if you don't mind, so please tell me about it again. How did you get the call from Pete or The Who's team to get the gig? What were you doing before that call happened? And what were some of the deciding factors for you to eventually take the gig?
Well, when I got a call from Bill Kirby, The Who's manager, he said, The Who have had a meeting because Keith's no longer with us. They decided to carry on. So I said, okay, Bill. He said, but they want you to join the band and not considering anyone else. I said, oh, wow. So very flattering, Bill, but I'm sorry, I can't. What do you mean you can't? I said, I can't. I'm already starting a band we're just about to get a record deal on Atlantic with Kenney Jones. Kenney Jones was our record producer. So I told him that, and he said, well, look, Pete's coming into the office this evening, early evening. So I said, yeah. He said, come and see Pete. I said, well, always happy to see Pete. Oh, yeah. So went to the office later. Saw Pete, sat down, we were having a good old chat, laughing about all the small faces in The Who used to tour a lot together. We toured Australia. That's another story entirely. So he started to laugh and have a good old laugh. So this went on for ages. So I said, then Pete just said, you've got to join The Who. You're one of us. You're like a mod, So, okay. I said, look, Pete, I understand. I said, luckily my band that I'm forming now is in town tonight. She's half American, half English. So the Americans come over. And so I'm seeing them, later on tonight. So I said, look, let me have a word with them. I'll let you know. And he said, okay, great. I went to see the band. I said, look, guys, I've been asked to join The Who. And they went, oh, Kenney, you've got to do that. You got to accept it. Look, I said, well, no, I started this band. He went, no, Kenney, look, we understand why. You've got to do it. They were so gracious and kind. So that was it. But with their blessing, I went back to Pete and I said, okay, Pete, I can join The Who. But I said, one thing I'm going to tell you now is I can only play Kenney Jones.
Yeah.
I can't. I'm not going to copy Keith. He was a great friend of mine. He's also a flamboyant sort of character. I said, no, I'm not going to do it, but I said I will play some of the fills and that I like I won't get pulled again. There's certain fills there, things like that. So I said, look, I will play some of them because I like the fills.
Yeah.
So he said, okay, great, no problem. Thing is, he said, we have a chance. No, Keith's no longer with us. We have a chance to do something completely different.
Yeah.
So I was waiting for something completely different to happen. Because nothing happened because all the people want their hits.
Of course.
So that was it. So the hardest thing was learning the repertoire of all the bloody songs within a short space of time.
How long did you have?
About 2 weeks.
Oh, wow. And then what? You were headed off on tour?
Yeah.
Damn.
So we played a couple of gigs that we announced literally about in the afternoon. We announced on the radio that we were going to do a gig with me and him. So after we rehearsed for 2 weeks, we did this gig somewhere in London, and all I could do is concentrate on what I was doing. And then the last song came, Won't Get Fooled Again. You know, when you start, you do the ends.
Yeah.
Then through the sticks in here, and everyone turned around. Emmett was laughing at me, and everyone was laughing. I was so pleased that we actually did it and got through it.
You got through it, yeah, exactly. High pressure situation, not an easy situation to take on a role from a passed away member, especially when, you know, they had their own sort of following. And to then have 2 weeks to learn that much material, very admirable.
Oh, shit.
I mean, I know that you were buddies with them and that you guys essentially crossed paths on the same scene. You mentioned you toured Australia, stuff like that. But the idea of chemistry within bands, and I suppose this relates similar to the gang mentality I was talking about earlier. But can you talk about that for a second, about how, you know, when you've got your own group and you develop in it, like the band that was about to potentially get a label or a record deal, you've got time to develop chemistry. And that chemistry can really be quite detrimental to the way the band sounds, the way the band gels together on stage, stage presence, etc., etc., etc. So when you come into a situation like The Who, when essentially those three members have a certain amount of chemistry together because they've played together, and you are, for lack of a better term, the outsider coming in, even though you've known each other, how difficult is that?
Well, everything's difficult to begin with. But the thing is, it's like being in one band, because we all, you know, I used to play on demos with Pete at Pete's house on a little tiny 18-inch bass drum. So you get in my car quite easily. And I played on the soundtrack of Tommy while I was in the Pacers, funny enough.
Yeah.
So it's like being in one band, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. Sort of camaraderie across the scene, I guess.
Camaraderie across the bands, yeah.
That's cool. I know I mentioned it before, but I always thought that the two records that you played on, It's Hard and Face Dancers, were both incredible. Can you talk to me a little bit about the recording process during those recording sessions, if you remember? And additionally, could you potentially talk to up-and-coming musicians who might be listening to this show about, you know, what they can maybe do to get the most out of their recording sessions if it's their first time going into a studio?
First time going into a studio, I would say to everybody, you know, once you become confident musician, you know, you love your if you're playing a drum or a guitar. It's first of all, you got to believe in the song. The song you're playing on, you've got to be part of you. You have to become part of it. So when you're playing, you know, if the song's that good, you know, you'll play good. If the song's not very good, you know, you're not going to play very good. So you have to believe in it.
Yeah. And what about the sessions themselves? Can you remember anything interesting or storytelling worth from those sessions?
And I remember playing sort of Eminence Front.
Wonderful song. One of my favorites.
And Cry If You Want.
Yeah.
It's all on the snare drum. Lumpa, lumpa, yeah.
And possibly an ignorant question here, Kenny, but back then, when you were going into studio, did you guys spend days finding snare drum sounds or trying different snare drums, like sort of what happened in the kind of like mid 80s to mid 90s, early 2000s, where people were spending hypothetically $1 million trying to find a drum sound on a record? Or was it a matter of you guys were all pros, you had your gear, you got the gear shipped to studio, someone set it up, you got there, tuned it up, found a sound and rolled with it?
I'm very fortunate to most of my drumming life. We had a record producer, Kenney Jones.
Incredible producer.
And he used to get me the greatest drum sound. I used to say, "How'd you do that, Glenn? How many mics to put?" I can't remember. And he said, "It's you. I just captured your sound." In the Olympic studio, they had a great big room in the Olympic studio. And he put one overhead mic on, one bass drum mic, and that was it.
So cool.
But I said, "Well, how'd you do that?" He said, "Well, it's about where you position the mic. I just capture the ambient sound of your drum kit in the room. So that's how I get these wonderful drum sounds."
So cool.
I can't tell you how many snare drums I've collected over the years. Black Buses, or some thin, some big, some chunky.
Yeah.
I still come back to my little piccolo.
Amazing. And do you still all have, do you still have all that gear?
I said, yeah, I do, yeah. It's funny. When you sort of grow, when you're struggling, when you first time getting, you want to buy a next one, you got to pay for it.
Yeah.
The minute you become famous, they give it to you. And you can afford it.
Yeah.
Never get over it. I can't give it.
Such a catch-22 situation, huh? When you need it, no one gives it to you.
It's a catch-22.
What would you say the hardest part about being a career musician was for you?
Hardest part, I think, when someone dies in the band.
Yeah.
That's about it.
Yeah, that's a heavy answer. Very good. Now, Kenney, I know we spoke about this before as well, and I'm sorry to have to get you to repeat yourself, but you told me a story about how you helped Zach Starkey attain one of Keith Moon's drum kits when you joined The Who. Would you mind retelling me that story, please?
Okay, well, let me set the scene.
Yeah, please.
Bill Harrison was Keith's drum roadie at that time. And he's also my drum roadie, but, in his spare time. So when I joined The Who, I'm cutting a long story short, when I joined The Who, they were rehearsing in the Shepperton Studios. And where's Keith keep his drums? Where did he keep them? He said, and they're locked up in that warehouse over there. I said, okay, take me over there. I went over there. Saw Keith, right, Premier Keith it was. I said, okay, let's just pack it up, Bill. We're going to put it in the van. What's that for? I said, well, because basically Zach admired Keith. Keith always promised him he would give him his white drum kit. Put it in the van, we're going to take it over, set it up in his front room. Maureen Starkey was a good friend, his mum. We put it in the van, got to his house, set it up in his front room. I mean, it's a full kit, so it took up all the bloody front room. We came in from school, we said, oh, Dad, we've got a surprise for you. He said, oh, what's that? He said, go and have a look in the front room. Open the door, and he went, hey, he could not believe it.
Yeah.
All the tom-toms, all the kit cymbals, a lot. So I said, here's that, get behind it and have a play. I said, for a start, that you don't really need all these drums. I said, cause basically, you're playing L shape.
Yeah.
Most like Flod, tom, snare drum, and floor toms. I said, look, just experiment with it, but play basic first. So really, I didn't show him how to play. I just encouraged him to play.
Yeah.
The rest of it, you just got, you teach yourself in a sense. You got to discover your own style.
I have to agree. And it's something that, talking from my own opinion here, I find it's something that you don't hear much on records anymore. You can still hear it live, but now with drumming in particular, and I'm stereotyping, everything seems to get quantized, so pushed in time, and then most songs and stuff seem to get sampled. So it's like you were talking about the sound and the ambience of your drum kit from Glenn Johns. That seems to nowadays be almost like it's a dying art. There's a handful of guys. I mean, you've got Travis Barker. He has a sound. You can hear it when he's on a record. I'm talking newer drummers, right? Dave Grohl. These aren't new drummers. They've been around for 30 years already. But like they've got a sound. It's like if I listen to the charts now, a lot of the drums just sound like the same sample. So I think you're absolutely.
But that's right. They're not really. They're not get. No, you're not hearing the note. The note is sampled, so it cuts off.
Yeah. Yeah, and like, listen, I get that audio quality is different now, and that like maybe I don't know, maybe they feel like they need to have things sound the same in order to have a hit. Like, so for example, there's a big hit, so everyone tries to copy that sound. But I do feel like the music has been greatly affected by that, because it used to be that somebody could play something and it might have even sounded a little bit wrong, but that essentially became their sound.
It's got too clicky and too short.
Yeah.
They don't leave the note to ring long enough.
Yeah.
So if you go, oh, you have to let you're playing the instrument.
Yeah.
But otherwise, the instrument's playing you.
Yeah. I have to agree. So, Kenney, away from practice and trying to develop your own sound, in regards to trying to have a music career, what advice could you give aspiring up-and-coming musicians who don't have a clue what to do or how to get out there? So they might be in their rooms practicing and they dreaming about having or trying to have a music career, but they don't know what to do. What would you advise?
I would say go and watch other drummers, pick up some things from them, try and get to know those drummers, and let them show you some stuff, like paradiddle or some things. And you're sitting next to another drummer, and they show you a paradiddle. The paradiddle is not easy to play when you first do it. Mummy, daddy, roll you can.
Yeah.
But take your time, practice as much as you can. But when you get too frustrated you can't get the speed up, put your sticks down, walk away from it, come back in about half an hour later and try it again, but do it very slowly. You'll get faster and faster every time.
Something we never spoke about the last time that I'd like to just briefly touch upon this time is the Law. Tell me about forming a group like the Law, which essentially is a supergroup. Is there automatic pressure attached to that situation because everybody involved has a certain amount of fame and critical acclaim behind their names? Or is it just a matter of guys who get in a room and once again are wanting to make music?
No. I mean, when it comes to the Law, it was, we did, Paul Rogers was on the bill, and we did an arms talk for Ronnie Lane. I'm sorry, 1983, I think.
Mm-hmm.
And so on that bill was Eric Clapton, Joe Cocker, Nicky Hopkins on keyboard, Jeff Beck, Jimmy Page. And I could go on further.
Yeah.
But so we all had little slots of music that we played. I played with Eric Clapton about 40 minutes. Then someone else would come. Like Jeff Beck would play with his band and his drum. Me and Charlie Watts were on that bill, played together. And behind us was Ray Cooper on percussion.
Yeah.
But so when we did the tour, did it like a month's tour or something like that. We came back to England and I was in a nightclub, and there on the table was Paul Rogers. So you had to get me bumping into each other. He said, "Oh, Kenney, he said, just the man I want to talk to." What's that? He said, "You ever played it?" I said, "Yeah." So I said, I want to work here." I said, "Okay, good." Uh, next, next week we went over to his place. Started to play. We wrote this song called "Laying Down the Law." I said I wanted a name for the band, so I came up with the name The Law.
Yeah.
It's only like 3 words, you know.
Whatever the occasion, effortless elegance is right this way. Because Hilton brings you new ways to stay courtesy of the Nomad London. And it doesn't stop at award-winning dining in a space draped in velvet and illuminated by vintage chandeliers. No, this day goes beyond with unparalleled personalized service and attentive hospitality. Oh, and did we mention the Nomad London can be booked using your Hilton Honors points at Hilton.com? Hilton, for the stay.
So we just kept flying and enjoying each other's company. It just was a natural thing to do. Not only that, I don't know, I've been very fortunate to work with some of the greatest singers in the world.
Without a doubt.
I've got to say, Paul Rodgers was the ultimate, I think.
Yeah, that guy's got a set of pops on him, huh? Damn. That actually leads me to my next question. I mean, you've worked with a real list of who's who, you know, Paul Rodgers, Rod Stewart, Jeff Beck, you know, Steve Marriott, Roger Daltrey, Pete Townsend. The list just goes on. You mentioned Clapton.
You're forgetting Chuck Berry.
Ah, Chuck Berry. I mean, I bet that's a story. I'm going to ask you about that in a second. But how...
And Jerry Lewis.
Oh, man, you worked with Jerry? That's cool. What did you do with Jerry?
We did the London session.
So cool. So cool. How do you stay humble and grounded when you're around some of these people, especially when some musicians acquire a little bit of fame and they rarely let it go to their head? What do you do, or what have you done to remain so humble?
Well, let me put it this way. When I was first started playing drum, and I first had a hit record, I started touring Germany, Helsinki, all over Europe, you know. And I used to come back every Sunday. I would go to see, have a drink with my dad in a pub, local to in the East End. So I used to come back and tell them where I've been, what I've done, or whatever. That was very interesting. And then Monday, no, everyone was ignoring me. So I said, what have they not talking to me? They were, when you come, you're only talking about yourself. You never ask how anybody else is.
Interesting.
But that was the end of my big head, my fame. So I learned a lesson there straight away. So I keep my feet well grounded on the ground. You know?
Yeah. That's actually so powerful.
I asked everyone what they've been up to. It's very important to have a two-way conversation.
Yeah.
Instead of bragging about yourself.
Kenney, my second last question, and again, this is really more from a fanboy kind of situation, but I want to talk to you about, I know I'm losing you, that Rod and Ronnie put out that you're playing on. I know I've spoken to you about this before. You do a really cool drum solo in this song. I forget how long the song is. I want to say it's at least 6 or 7 minutes. It's up there. Talk to me about your approach during that solo, or about soloing in general. Are you one of those guys that kind of just go with it in the moments, or did you manage to have a bit of time to work out what you wanted to do? Or when you're doing solos, do you try and kind of come up with a preconceived idea? What's your approach?
Well, in the beginning, it started out as a drum break, you know, on the record. So on the record, it's not very. It's just a drum break. So where Rod can thing across them. But when we got on stage, it turned into the drum break got longer and longer. Till one day they went up the pub and left me there on my own. I was trying to think what to do. So I had to practice all my rudiments and things I'd learned. And I started to enjoy it.
Don't you find that that's such a typical thing? You know, when other members in the band's solo, the drummer's always there to keep time and keep a form of security. So, like, even if things go wrong, there's time and there's security and comfort. And when drummers solo, like, yeah, it's like you say, the band just disappear or do their own thing, and they don't even remember where one is when they come back. It's like, what the heck, dudes?
I know.
Last question, Kenney. What do you feel has either been the best piece of advice you've ever received in regards to a music career, or what do you think has been the best thing you've learnt along the way that might be good advice to somebody who's trying to achieve a music career?
Simple answer to that is I'm still learning. I'm still trying. I'm still, to get behind my kit, and I sort of practice a few things and say, oh, that sounds nice. Or I've been influenced by somebody else, some other drummer. I try and work that out. But the best thing is never forget yourself.
Yeah.
Keep practicing.
That's great. Kenney, I can't thank you enough, man. Seriously, I must apologize about the audio in the first conversation we had. I'm sorry to have taken up double of your time, but you've been extremely gracious. So I want to respect your time, and we're going to stop there. But thank you so much. I truly wish you nothing but the best, and I hope that New Faces release is doing very well for you guys.
Time will tell, won't it?
Yeah. Thank you so much, man. Thank you for the inspiration, and thank you for your time.
Pleasure. You take care.
You too. Bye-bye.
Bye.
There we have it. Mr. Kenney Jones, everybody. What an absolute gentleman. And I can't thank him enough for doing this interview twice. As I mentioned, we had a couple of audio issues, so we had to start again. If you want to know more about Kenney's life, make sure you get his book, Let the Good Times Roll. You can actually buy signed copies off of his website for only £10. His website is Kenney, Kenney, Jones.com. For all things musicians mentor related, please check out musicians-mentor.com. My name is Travis Mark. I am here to answer any questions you have about your music career, any guidance you might need. But mostly, I just love talking music. So if you have any questions for me, make sure you check me out on social media or just drop me a DM. I'm always happy to talk. That's it for today, though. Until next time, keep pushing, be diligent, and I'll see you soon. Peace.
All right, here we go.
New Phineas and Ferb is here.
We're back, baby.
For 104 more days
I know what we're gonna do today.
of summer vacation.
I am ready for summer shenanigans. Let's do it. Oh, yeah.
All right. We're gonna bust Phineas and Ferb once and for all.
Are we gonna do this again?
New inventions, shenanigans, innators, adventures, and songs.
Brand new summer vacation.
New Phineas and Ferb starts June 5th on Disney Channel and next day on Disney Plus on DisneyPlus.Disney.com.